I almost didn't take the job because the house felt wrong the moment I stepped inside. Not dangerous exactly, just heavier than it should have been, like the air itself didn't move properly. The parents were polite, rushed, and unusually serious for a simple babysitting job, explaining the routine quickly and repeating the same instruction more than once. The baby was already asleep in the downstairs nursery. The doors were locked, the alarm was set, and everything I needed was on the first floor. Before leaving, the mother paused, looked directly at me, and said very calmly that I was not to go upstairs under any circumstances, no matter what I heard, no matter what I thought I needed. She didn't explain why, and the father avoided eye contact while nodding in agreement, as if this rule had already caused problems before. For the first hour, nothing happened. The house was quiet in a way that felt staged, every sound too clean, too isolated, like it had been carefully placed. I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone, occasionally checking the baby monitor, which showed the nursery exactly as expected. Still, I kept thinking about the upstairs, the fact that there were lights on behind the closed stairway door, and how strange it was that a family would forbid access to half their own house. I told myself it was probably renovations or a sleeping relative, something normal that didn't need explaining. But the feeling never fully went away. The first noise came a little after midnight, a soft creaking sound from above, like someone shifting their weight on old floorboards. I froze, listening carefully, waiting for it to stop, and when it didn't, my instinct was to stand up and check, the way anyone would in an unfamiliar house. I took 2 steps toward the staircase before remembering the warning, the way the mother's voice had dropped when she said it. I stopped myself, convinced it was just the house settling, but the creaking turned into something slower and more deliberate, pacing back and forth directly above the stairs, as if someone was aware of where I was standing. I checked the baby monitor again, half expecting to see movement, but the screen showed the nursery exactly as before, the baby breathing softly, undisturbed. That's when I noticed something else, something that made my stomach tighten. The monitor had 2 camera feeds available, but earlier I'd only seen one. Now there was a second feed active, labeled simply upstairs, showing a dark hallway illuminated by a single light at the far end. The camera angle was low, almost at floor level, and although nothing was moving, the feed felt wrong, like it was waiting for something to happen. I tried calling the parents, telling myself I was overreacting, but neither of them answered. The sounds above grew louder, no longer subtle, footsteps crossing the hallway, stopping then starting again, always ending directly above the staircase. I sat back down, heart racing, reminding myself that I had been given clear instructions and that breaking them might somehow make things worse. The fear wasn't just about what was upstairs anymore, but about the fact that the parents had anticipated this, had known exactly what I might hear and how I might react. The final moment came when the baby monitor flickered briefly, the image distorting before stabilizing again. For a split second, I thought I saw movement in the nursery, something tall and out of place near the crib. But when the picture cleared, everything looked normal. At the same time, the upstairs feed changed, the camera tilting slightly as if someone had adjusted it, and the hallway light turned off. The screen went black, replaced by a single line of text that hadn't been there before, written in plain white letters. It said that the upstairs rule was no longer for my safety, but for the baby's. I didn't go upstairs. I didn't leave the house either. I stayed exactly where I was until the parents returned, pale and silent, thanking me without asking questions. As I left, the father gently closed the stairway door behind him and locked it, and for just a moment I heard something on the other side react to the sound, something that had been very aware of my presence all night. I never babysat again after that, because once you realize some rules exist to keep things contained, you start wondering what happens when there's no one left to follow them. Before we move on to the next story, give us your verdict on this one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I had been babysitting for years by the time I took the call from the Halloways. They lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood. the kind with identical houses and perfectly trimmed lawns, and they needed someone last minute because their regular sitter had canceled. The job sounded easy enough. One baby, 9 months old, already asleep. They told me I could just watch TV and relax until they got back around midnight. When I arrived, everything felt normal, maybe too normal. The house was spotless, silent, and smelled faintly of lavender cleaner. Mrs. Halloway showed me the nursery, pointed out the baby monitor on the dresser, and reminded me not to go upstairs unless I absolutely had to. I remember thinking that was an odd thing to say, but I brushed it off. Parents are weird about their routines. The first hour passed quietly. The baby monitor sat on the coffee table beside me, its green light steady, the soft static hum filling the room. Every few minutes I glanced at the screen, watching the baby rise and fall beneath the blanket. Nothing unusual. Around 10:30, I noticed the image on the monitor flicker for a second. Just a brief distortion, like interference. Then it stabilized again. I told myself it was nothing. Old houses do that. A few minutes later, the sound changed. The gentle static was replaced by a faint shuffling noise. I picked up the monitor and turned up the volume, expecting to hear the baby stirring. Instead, I heard something heavier, slower, like someone shifting their weight on the floor. I looked at the screen, expecting to see the crib. I didn't. The camera was no longer aimed at the baby. It was pointed at the corner of the nursery, angled low, facing the open closet. The door was just barely cracked, darkness spilling out behind it. I froze. My first thought was that the parents had moved the camera earlier and forgotten to tell me. I tried to reassure myself as I adjusted the antenna, but the image didn't change. The closet door on the screen slowly moved, opening a little wider. I couldn't see inside, just the black space beyond. Then I heard breathing, not the baby's soft, uneven breathing. This was slow, deliberate, and close to the microphone. I called out the baby's name, my voice shaking, hoping to hear him cry or move. The breathing stopped. The monitor went completely silent. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. Then the image shifted again. The camera tilted upward slightly, as if someone were lifting it by hand. For a moment, the screen showed nothing but darkness. Then a face filled the frame. Pale. Too close. Eyes wide and unblinking, reflecting the green glow of the monitor. The mouth was stretched into something that wasn't quite a smile. I dropped the monitor. It hit the floor and cracked, the screen going black. I grabbed my phone and called Mrs. Halloway, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried Mr. Halloway. No answer. My chest felt tight, like the air had been sucked out of the room. I didn't think. I ran for the front door, my hands shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice before managing to unlock it. As I pulled the door open, I heard a sound behind me, bare feet on carpet, slow, unhurried. I didn't look back. I ran out into the street, screaming for help, my phone clutched in my hand. A neighbor's porch light turned on, then another. Someone asked me what was wrong, but I couldn't speak. I just pointed at the house, sobbing. The police arrived minutes later. They went inside with flashlights and guns drawn. They found the baby asleep in his crib, unharmed. They found the nursery camera unplugged and sitting on the floor. They found the closet empty. No signs of forced entry. No fingerprints that didn't belong to the family. The Halloways came home an hour later, furious and confused. They swore they didn't own a baby monitor with a camera that could move. They said the nursery camera was fixed in place and hadn't worked in years. When the police asked about the closet, Mrs. Halloway went pale. She admitted quietly that the previous owners had lost a babysitter years ago. She had vanished during a night shift. The baby she was watching was found alone in the crib the next morning. The case was never solved. I never babysat again. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear that breathing in my dreams. Slow, patient, like something waiting for me to look back at the screen. Before we move on to the next story, give us your verdict on this one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. The first thing the boy asked me wasn't my name or where his parents were going. It was whether the man would be quiet tonight. He said it casually, like he was asking about the weather. And when I didn't answer right away, he looked up at me with a confused expression, as if I were supposed to know exactly who he meant. I laughed awkwardly and asked him what man he was talking about, expecting him to say a neighbor or a cartoon character or something imaginary that kids come up with when they're bored. Instead, he shrugged and said it was the man who watched me when I wasn't looking. The parents had warned me their son had an active imagination. They mentioned nightmares and an imaginary friend phase, nothing unusual for a 6-year-old, and I reminded myself of that as I settled in for the night. The house was large but not creepy, modern and well lit, with glass doors that looked out into a dark backyard. I put on a movie for him, sat on the couch beside him, and tried to ignore the way he kept glancing past me toward the hallway, his eyes tracking something I couldn't see. About halfway through the movie, he leaned closer to me and whispered that the man didn't like it when I sat in that spot. I asked why, my voice light, trying not to scare him, and he said it was because that's where the man usually stood. He pointed to the space directly behind me. I didn't turn around right away. I don't know why. Something in his tone made me afraid of what I might see if I did. I asked him where his parents said the man came from. He frowned, thinking hard, then told me the man was already there when they moved in. He said his parents knew about him but pretended they didn't because it made things easier. When I asked what that meant, he just said that the man was nicer when everyone acted normal. The way he said it, like it was a rule he'd learned the hard way, sent a chill through me that I couldn't explain. As the night went on, his comments became more specific. He told me the man liked to stand in doorways. He said the man didn't have shoes and made no sound when he walked. He said the man leaned down very close to people's faces when they slept, just watching their eyes move behind their eyelids. Every time he said something like this, he would look directly at me, studying my reaction, as if checking whether I was finally aware enough. I eventually convinced him to go to bed, reading him a story while he clutched my arm tighter than necessary. Before I turned off the light, he asked me not to leave the room because the man didn't like being alone with new people. I told him everything was fine, that I'd be right outside, and I meant it. I sat in the hallway on the floor, scrolling on my phone, listening to the house settle around me. That's when I felt it. Not a sound or a movement, but the unmistakable sensation of being watched from behind. I stayed perfectly still, my heart pounding, every instinct screaming at me to turn around while another part of me begged me not to. From the bedroom, the boy whispered my name. When I leaned closer to the door, he whispered again, telling me the man was smiling now because I finally knew he was there. I didn't turn around. I stayed exactly where I was until the parents came home hours later, the feeling never leaving, the pressure behind my eyes growing heavier with every passing minute. When I finally stood up, the sensation vanished instantly, like something stepping away at the last possible second. As I was leaving, the boy hugged me tightly and thanked me for not looking. When I asked him why that mattered, he said the man only stays as long as you pretend he's invisible. Once you see him, he starts following you home instead. I still catch myself feeling watched in empty rooms sometimes. I never turn around right away. I don't want to give him a reason to leave the house. Before we move on to the next story, give us your verdict on this one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I knew something was off from the moment the parents explained the job, not because of what they said, but because of what they didn't. They told me the hours, the pay, where the snacks were, and which rooms I could use. But when it came to the child, their instructions were strangely vague. They said he would already be asleep when I arrived and that he rarely woke up, adding that if he did, I should stay calm and keep the house quiet. They repeated that last part more than once, as if noise itself was the real concern. I assumed they were just nervous first-time parents, so I nodded along and didn't ask questions I thought might make me seem inexperienced. The house was large and unusually empty, not messy or neglected, just stripped of anything that felt personal. No family photos, no drawings on the fridge. The child's bedroom door was closed, and the hallway light outside it was left on, casting a long, pale strip across the floor. The parents showed me the living room and kitchen, then paused before leaving, reminding me again that I didn't need to check on him unless there was an emergency. When I asked what they meant by that, the mother smiled tightly and said I'd know if there was one. For the first few hours, nothing happened. The house stayed silent and I stayed downstairs watching TV at low volume, trying not to think about the closed door at the end of the hall. Around 11, I noticed a sound I hadn't heard before. A soft tapping that came and went in irregular intervals. It wasn't loud enough to identify, but it was persistent, like fingers drumming lightly on wood. I muted the television and listened carefully. The sound wasn't coming from upstairs. It was coming from inside the walls, moving slowly from one room to another. I told myself it was pipes or old wiring, but that explanation stopped working when the tapping began to follow me. When I went into the kitchen, it shifted closer. When I sat back on the couch, it moved again, always just out of sight, always keeping pace. I considered checking on the child just to reassure myself, but something about the parents' warnings held me back. The tapping stopped the moment I stood up, leaving the house so quiet that my own breathing sounded too loud. The realization came suddenly and without drama. I was standing in the hallway staring at the child's closed bedroom door when it occurred to me that I hadn't heard a single sound from him all night. No crying, no shifting, not even the subtle noises sleeping children usually make. I pressed my ear to the door, heart racing, and heard nothing at all, not even breathing. Before I could react, a voice spoke from behind me, low and close to my ear, telling me not to open it. I didn't scream. I didn't turn around. I stood frozen, trying to convince myself I was imagining things, that fear was filling in gaps my mind couldn't handle. The voice spoke again, clearer this time, explaining that the child didn't need watching anymore, and that my job was simply to stay downstairs and keep the house occupied. It said the parents knew this, that they hired sitters not to care for their son, but to make sure the house never felt empty long enough for something else to notice. When the parents returned, everything felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. They thanked me quickly, paid me in cash, and asked if the night had been quiet. I said yes, because I didn't know what else to say. As I left, I glanced once more at the hallway. The bedroom door was open now, the room beyond completely dark. I couldn't see a bed or toys or any sign that a child lived there at all. I never found another babysitting job in that neighborhood. Months later, I passed by the house and saw a new family moving in, smiling, unloading boxes, unaware of what they were stepping into. I thought about warning them, but I didn't know how to explain that sometimes babysitters aren't hired to protect children. Sometimes they're there to distract whatever is waiting patiently in the dark, pretending to be alone. Before we move on to the next story, give us your verdict on this one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. The parents mentioned the basement in passing, the same way someone might mention a closet or a spare room. Except they told me not to worry about it because the door was sealed and hadn't been used in years. They said the house was old, that previous owners had strange ideas about renovations, and that the basement was irrelevant to my job. All I needed to do was watch their daughter, keep the doors locked, and ignore any noises that came from below the house after midnight. They said that last part while laughing, like it was a joke they'd told too many times to find funny anymore. The girl was 8 and unusually quiet, polite in a way that felt practiced. She stayed close to me, glancing toward the hallway more often than necessary, and when I asked her if she wanted to play a game or watch TV, she shook her head and asked if the basement door was still gone. I told her I hadn't seen one, trying to sound reassuring, and she nodded as if that confirmed something important. She told me it used to appear sometimes, usually when adults weren't paying attention, and that her parents said it was just her imagination, even though they always looked relieved when it disappeared again. As the night went on, the house felt heavier, the air growing thick and stale no matter how many windows I opened. Around midnight, I heard a sound that didn't match anything I could explain. A low, dragging noise that came from beneath the floorboards, slow and deliberate, like something being pulled across concrete. I froze, remembering the parents' warning, and tried to convince myself it was just an old house settling. That excuse fell apart when the sound stopped directly below the living room, as if whatever was down there had realized someone was listening. The girl sat beside me, her knees pulled to her chest, and asked quietly if I could see the door yet. I told her no, my voice barely steady, and she sighed with a mix of disappointment and fear. She said it usually showed up by now, that it liked being noticed, and that the worst nights were the ones where someone acknowledged it existed. When I asked her what happened if someone opened it, she shook her head and said no one ever came back upstairs to explain. I wish I could say I didn't look for the door, but curiosity and fear have a way of feeding each other. I walked down the hallway slowly, scanning the walls, telling myself I was proving it wasn't there. Halfway down, I saw it. A narrow wooden door where there hadn't been one before, its surface scarred and darkened as if it had been dragged through fire. It didn't have a handle, just a faint outline where one might have been long ago. The dragging sound returned, louder now, closer, coming from the other side. The girl stood behind me, whispering that it was stronger tonight because her parents weren't home. She said it didn't like being ignored forever, and that eventually it tried to remind people it was part of the house too. I backed away from the door, refusing to touch it, and pulled her into the living room, where I kept every light on until the parents returned. When they came home, the door was gone again, the hallway blank and ordinary as if nothing had ever changed. I told them what I saw. They didn't look surprised. They just thanked me for not opening it and said most babysitters don't last past the first appearance. As I left, the mother told me the basement had been sealed decades ago after something down there learned how to knock. She said it doesn't always stay below, and that pretending the door isn't real is the only thing that keeps it from finding a way out. I still avoid houses with basements now. Sometimes late at night I hear a faint dragging sound beneath my apartment floor. I never check. I don't want to give it a reason to remember me. If you made it this far, thank you for spending your night with us. If these stories gave you chills, there's plenty more waiting. Don't forget to subscribe to Night Fear Stories for new terrifying tales every single night. Sleep well, if you can.